Yeah, if you have your Bibles, or if you have your Bible app, go ahead and go to Matthew chapter 21. These are probably my most favorite 3 weeks of church because we're coming up on Easter. And there's something about these next few weeks of just readying ourselves for the understanding of what Jesus did. And I know that Resurrection Sunday should be every day for us, not just every Sunday, but every day. But there is this time of the year where we get to actually celebrate, and the world over celebrates, maybe in their own way, but they do celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And you know, every year I think about this road to the cross that Jesus had to take. And I want to particularly focus on a couple sections of his journey, because there's such rich text when you talk about this road to the cross. And I think for me it starts with Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, but then it moves on quickly to him just being at Lazarus, Mary, and Martha's house, and then he heads into Jerusalem for the triumphant entry, and the palm branches are being thrown his way, and the garments are thrown down so the animals can walk on them, and they're singing Hosanna, and they're singing Blessed is the one who comes, and it's ringing out throughout the city, and there's this beautiful picture of them receiving the King. And them not even understanding fully who they're receiving, but they know that they're worshiping the Messiah, the one who raises from the dead, because he's already demonstrated that with Lazarus. He's the one that's believed to become the conquering hero, right? That's going to overthrow the Roman Empire and take off these yokes of bondage that the whole world, but nonetheless Israel is under, right? And so and here they are just praising him and Hosanna, Hosanna, and they're waving their palm branches and they're excited about what's to come. But little do they realize it's the way that they think he should come and that he is coming isn't the way that he came. Isn't the final product wasn't what they expected. And so, but we have to keep in mind that Jesus is king, right? Jesus is king of everything. And it's important to understand that even as we talk about this over the next 3 weeks. But, we go back you can go back into Genesis chapter 49, and you'll see that God promises that a king is going to come from the line of Judah, right? From that family of Judah, and that a scepter is going to be in his hand, and that he would be the rightful heir of the throne. And as you look at the entire Old Testament, it's reiterated over and over and over again that this king, the promise of the king, is coming, and it fills up the Old Testament. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, it talks about that David would have a son, and it's capital S, this son that will come, and it'd be an eternal king. And in Psalms chapter 2, chapter 45, chapter 72, it talks about the promise of the coming king. And I love in Isaiah chapter 9 where it talks about the government would rest on his shoulders. This king, not just a government, not just this government, but it says the government, meaning all governments, would rest on his shoulders. And that there would be no other king but this God. And it talks about that in different books of the Bible, in Zechariah, Micah, and Zephaniah, that this eternal king will be born, coming into this world to establish himself as the rightful ruler. And sometimes it can be so ethereal, where it's just something that's out there in the air. That we don't really grab it for ourselves and make it real and personal, that he is the ruler of everything in my life. Amen. He is the king over all the things that have to do with me. His throne is established in my heart, not just in the world, not just for the church, but for me as the church. And it's not so much the importance of where he was born, but from where he was born. Born in heaven, came to earth, lived like you and I, destined for the cross, destined for the cross, destined even further for the throne, to be eternal king. The Jews believed that their king was going to come and their king was going to conquer Rome and was going to sit on the throne and rule from this place of an earthly king. He'd be this military leader, and he'd bring prosperity, and he'd bring this economic success. He was supposed to take all the disharmony in the world and make it all harmonious in one society for them. And that he was going to be able to make it all work the way that in their minds it was supposed to work. But instead of pointing fingers at Rome, he pointed fingers at his own people. Instead of becoming a conquering hero, he became a confronter. Instead of talking about revolution and overthrowing the government, he talked about redemption and overthrowing the thrones of our hearts. Not what anyone was expecting. Because instead of cleaning out the enemy, he cleaned out his own house. Again, not the king that they were expecting, but the true King of Kings. The Lord of heaven was who showed up. And I think sometimes in our own lives, we expect God to show up in these ways that are going to be fruitful and helpful for our circumstances and our situation. And when Jesus is saying, yeah, I am here for your situation, I am here for your circumstance, but it just doesn't look the same way that you think it will look. I think it's important for us to understand that as we look at the entirety of who Jesus is, the full sacrifice that he made, and the victory that was won on the cross, is that, again, he is the king of my life. Even though he did all these things for the world, I'm a part of that. You're a part of that. And yes, he sees you where you're at. He sees you with your pillow getting soaking wet. He sees you with your biting your nails because am I going to make it? He sees all of that. But he's the King of Kings and he's the Lord of Lords, and he's not a Lord that panics. He's not a king that pushes a panic button. This wasn't my first time to Abu Dhabi. The first time I went to Abu Dhabi was about 12 years ago. And I had this suitcase that looked like many other suitcases, apparently. And so I'm rushing to get out of the airport. And if you've ever been to that region, it's different. It's not like they have TSA. They have military, they're armed military. And so it's a little intimidating. And so I'm a little nervous, and so I see what looks like my bag. I take it off the turnstile, and I go to this place. We're staying with some friends, and we're sitting at the table, and they're telling us all these stories about, the region. I forget who I was telling, but if you're jaywalking and you get hit by a car, they will arrest the person in the car and throw them in jail. And whoever, their family members or whatever, has to pay to get them out of jail. And if they don't have enough money, then they have to stay in that jail until someone pays enough to get them out. It's not like, it's a different society, right? But they're telling us all these, I'm thinking they're horror stories, but that's just the reality of how they live. And so we're laughing and talking, whatever, and it's about midnight now. We go to bed and I go to unzip my bag, and I realize this is not my bag. So I have to go tell the guy, hey, can you take me back to the airport? I've got to get my bag, and I've got to give this one back. So we get back to the airport. It's about a half an hour drive. And I get to, like this baggage place, and they say, okay, give me your passport. And I said, no. If you have my passport, how am I going to get out of this place? He says, no, you got to give me your passport. I said, no. He says, well, can I make a photocopy? So I'm, sure, make a photocopy, whatever. So then we go to the baggage claim, and I see my bag. It's right there sitting in the middle of the thing. I said, that's my bag. They pick it up. They put my bag and the other person's bag on a trolley, and they wheel it out to, where you have to get it x-rayed out on the way out, right? It's like customs kind of on the way out. So there's a guy looking at the computers, like the monitor, and there's a military guy behind him. And he's got the braids on his, the hat, he's like, so I'm sweating a little bit, right? And so they put my bag through the x-ray machine, and the military guy looks at me and goes, you have a knife in your bag. I said, nope. No, I don't have a knife in my bag. And so he said, no, you have a knife in your bag. So they run it through the x-ray again, and they ran it like 3 times, and every time he was telling me, you have a knife in your bag. The last time he said, I'm going to give you one last chance to tell me about the knife in your bag. Now my heart is like a brick in my throat, right? My feet are like ice cold because all the adrenaline has rushed down, and I don't have no blood anywhere else except for the pounding in my heart. Because now I think I'm going to jail. And I don't know how it happened, why it happened. It had to be Jesus, because the guy that was with me that asked for my passport started going like toe to toe with this guy in Arabic and yelling. They're screaming at each other. And meanwhile, like I'm like, everything's closing in around me. I just got tunnel vision. And so the guy just grabs me, he says, get your bag. And he grabs me, I grab my bag, and then he whisks me off to like this other area. And I look at him, I said, what was that about? And he's like, he's trying to make a name for himself off of you as an American. And so like so he's just giving me the riot act. So I get my bag and we go, and the guy says, okay, I'm gonna keep this picture of your passport, because if the guy whose bag you took says there's anything missing, we'll know how to find you. So I'm like, this guy could say he had gold bars in his bag, for all I know. So we're in Abu Dhabi this whole time, and I'm like, we're laughing, we're having fun, we're ministering, and every once in a while I'll think, I'm never getting out of here. I'm never getting out of here. And it's the most frightening thing, right? Because you don't know what's next. You don't know what is going to be around the corner. You're in this foreign place, and all you hear are all these stories. But honestly, God was with me, because we got through customs. We walked out, and there was no issues, no dramas. But this idea that someone else had control over my life, when in actuality, they didn't. Jesus had control over my life. And it didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter if the guy said, yeah, I got gold bars. And it wouldn't matter if he said, oh, he stole this, or I had this it wouldn't have mattered, because God was in control of my life. Because he's the Lord of everything. Even in those moments when we're at our most fearful, even in those moments where when we're scared the most, when we don't know what's around the corner, when our doctors tell us one thing, but we believe we don't believe the report of the doctor. We believe the report of the Lord. And so we have to stand on faith and believe. And no, we don't ignore science, because God created science. And so we rely on what God has done, but we also trust in him as the source. Doctors are resources. Medicine is resource, but God is the source, right? And there's people in this room right now that are thankful that God is the source and thankful for his resources. But we have to trust in him as Lord of all, not just Lord of some. Sorry, let's get to Matthew 21. Starting at verse 18, it says, now in the morning, when he was returning to the city, he became hungry. He's talking about Jesus. And he says, seeing a lone fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it except for leaves only. Now, let me stop there. And in verse 18, he talks about, he stopped at the fig tree because he was hungry. And to me, this is an important fact to not gloss over. It's the idea that Jesus is showing his humanity at this moment. right? Realizing that as he's going to the cross, he's both God, but he's human, right? And so, yeah, of course, as humans, we get hungry. And so now he's saying, I'm going to this fig tree to get something to eat. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because even in our own humanity, there are things that we have to do in life that maybe sometimes we don't want to do. We have to go to work. If you like electricity and heat, you like food, there's certain things that we have to do, right? There's some realities to life. When we have kids, we just don't leave them and let them fend for themselves and figure it out. We have to take care of them and nurture them and bring them through. There's some realities to our lives, guys, but the truth of the matter is God is still in control of our lives. If we start to grab hold of the reins and we say, oh, this is going to be the way I want it, we're not trusting that God is in control of it all. Even in our own humanity, we have to remember that God is with us. And that's Jesus right here in this very point. He was hungry. He stopped because he was hungry and he wanted something to eat. So he went to the fig tree to get food, but realizing that he's still God. Because he could have just said, bread, tapenade. You know what I mean? He could have, but he didn't. He chose to live in that place of his humanity. And verse 19, seeing a lone fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it except leaves only. Here's how fig trees work. I had to look this up because you know how I am with plants. Not very good if you don't. Fig trees produce the figs first and then the leaves second. Right? And so the reason why Jesus went to this fig tree is because it had leaves and it looked like it was a fruitful tree. But in fact, what he found was he came to it and found nothing on it except for leaves. And so this tree is perpetrating a fraud. Right? This tree is looking like something that it is, but in actuality, it is not. And now here comes Jesus in his full humanity saying, here, I'm going to eat off of this tree because there's life on it. There's fruitfulness here. And he's finding nothing. Too many of us go to these types of trees that look like they have fruit, that look like they're designed to give us nourishment, to give us hope, to help us along our journey. And when we get there, we realize, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. The tree that Jesus plants in your life, those fig trees that Jesus plants in your life are always going to be full of fruit when we're abiding in him. Those fig trees, you're always going to find not just leaves there, but you're actually going to find what you need in the presence of God. Not like this tree. And so he says to the tree, no longer shall there ever be any fruit from you. And at once the fig tree withered. Now, there's two accounts to this story. Mark tells one in Mark chapter 11, and this is Matthew's version in chapter 21. Matthew kind of combines everything together where Mark gives a chronological order of what happened, right? So on Tuesday was the curse of the tree, and then on Wednesday, the tree actually dies. But Matthew's approach is his direct approach, I think, is a little more helpful in what we'll focus on. Because again, here we're looking at this tree and saying, oh man, there's going to be life. There's going to be lusciousness on this tree. I'm going to be able to fill my belly with the fruit from this tree. And if you look up the idea of having a fig tree if you have a yard and you have a fig tree in your yard, at that time you were prosperous. Only prosperous people had fig trees in their yard, right? And they were thought to bring relief and comfort. Right? So it's like if you have a Tesla in your yard, right? That's your fig tree. I'm just kidding, Mike. But it is. It's prosperous, right? But it's supposed to bring relief and comfort. And can I dare say this? I think all of us want comfort, relief, and prosperity. I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't want comfort, relief, and prosperity. Right? We want to live in the comfort of God. We want to not just live in the comfort of God. We want to live in the comfort of our own domiciles. We want to be able to go home and be comfortable and be able to rest and relax and find relief. We don't want to have to worry about paying bills, or if we're going to be able to pay the bill, or if we're going to be able to go to the doctor, because the last time we went to the doctor, it was so much money. And how do we do that again? And we want to live in a place where we don't have to worry about those things. And I think that's just a natural way of life. And here comes Jesus to this fig tree, thinking he's going to find those things. He's going to find the prosperity of this fig tree because he's going to be able to eat off of it. He understands the journey that he's on, right? Because again, this is Tuesday, and he knows Friday's coming, right? And so he's going to this fig tree to find some comfort and relief, and he can't find it. So he curses the tree. He curses the tree. Man, I know at times, sometimes we want to curse the things that God has given us. We want to curse the ideas that God has shown us because we're not finding the comfort. We're not finding the prosperity. We're not finding the relief. And can I just maybe encourage us and challenge us at the same time to make sure that we're finding the right tree? Because if it's a tree that we've planted, what we're going to get off of the tree that we plant is what we can develop and nurture and cultivate our own selves. But when we go to the tree that God has planted in our lives, that's when we're going to find fruit. That's when we're going to find prosperity. That's when we're going to find the comfort and relief. And I'm not meaning the prosperity like, name it and claim it. I'm talking about the fruitfulness of the life that we have in God. That's the prosperity that I'm talking about, the fruitfulness that's developed by being in the presence of God, by cultivating the ideas that God has given us, by cultivating and tending to the life and the freedom and the words that God has spoken over us. We cultivate those things so we can ultimately find the comfort and relief that He's given us, that He's prepared for us. Jesus cursed the tree not because he was hungry and couldn't eat off of it, but because it was presenting itself as one thing, but in fact was not that thing at all. It was only masquerading. I think in this moment, we have to even think about our own Christian walks. Are we doing the right things? Are we saying the right things that show the leaves on our tree? Or are we actually producing the fruit designated for us as believers? Just because it shows the glimpse of life doesn't mean that it is fruitful. Let's take the heat off of you and me. But we have friends that position themselves, right? We have colleagues that position themselves as maybe having life. And sometimes it takes more energy to be around them than it doesn't, right? Because they're constantly trying to show us that they have fruit, but there actually is none. And so they're doing all these extenuous things. Sorry, I'm a little jet lagged. Trying to prove themselves to us. Trying to prove that they have life. Trying to prove that they are in the place that they should be. And in reality, all they have to do is say yes to Jesus, and they'll be in that place. But they fight, they struggle, they don't want to give in to the Lord. They'd rather live life on their own terms. They'd rather live life based on the things that they understand and they can know and maybe they can count on, instead of just saying yes to Jesus. And so now they live these lives and they present themselves to be something that they're not. And now we're around them and it's like it's exhausting. It's exhausting. Because now you have to feed them off of your tree. And you're feeding them life. And you're giving them what should be mutual in our relationship. Maybe you're the friend. I don't know. Maybe I'm the friend. I don't want to be a drain. A friend of mine calls it an oxygen. He says, "Are you being an oxygen thief?" I'm stealing everyone else's oxygen here because I'm not living up to the things that God has called me to live up to. And, can I be honest? When I talk about living up to the things that God has called us to, really, it's our relationship with Him. Because when we have our own personal relationship with Jesus, when we spend time with the Lord, when we're attached to that vine, and He begins to speak to us, and He begins to show us, and we begin to live for Him, that's when we are actually living the fullest life that we could ever live. Easy? No. Full? Yes. Exhausting? Sometimes. But when we know that we're doing this for Jesus, when we know that we're in communion with Jesus, then it's a different perspective that we have on it. Because it's not, man, I am doing a lot. I maybe am a little bit tired, but God has given me grace to live in this space. And that's all He ever wants. Philippians 4:13 is a prime example of forgetting what lies behind. I press on, I press on, I go forward to grab hold of that upward call, the thing that Jesus laid hold of me for. It's not for you to do things. The thing that He grabbed hold of you for was so that He could bring you back into right relationship with God, the Father. That's the only thing that He ever asks. Now, some of us may be called to do certain things, and He asks us to step out in faith to do other things. But the reality is, all He wants is for us to be with Him, to find our comfort, to find our relief in Him, to find our prosperity in Him. This Lord, this Jesus who saved our souls. Sometimes I don't think we comprehend it because we get caught up in our day-to-day lives. But He saved your soul from eternal damnation. Think about your eternity. And some of you, man, I've been here for long enough. This eternity I've been living right now, this is long enough. And I'm telling you, this isn't a smidgen, a quarter, a pint-sized bit of the life that we'll live with Jesus for eternity. Now, and we have that choice to say, nah, you know what? Thanks, God, but no thanks. And so then we live for eternity outside of His presence. Someone said that during COVID, that was the wrath of God. And can I tell you something? If that was the wrath of God, I'll take it. Honestly, if all I had to do is stay in my house and wear a mask, if I had to go outside or wash my hands or whatever, that was the extent of God's wrath. Please let that be. I don't think so. I don't think it was even near a close idea of what the wrath of God is like, being separated for all of eternity from His presence. But He saved us from that. So now we get to live for eternity in His presence. Maybe like Kim's standing next to me during worship and she's like covering her ear because maybe I'm off tune or whatever. When we get to heaven, it won't matter. We're going to be singing anyways. We're going to be singing day and night, palm branches in hand. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. That's our reality because of what Jesus did. And that's the reality of what he wants for us here on earth. While we're here to find that comfort, to find that prosperity, to find the relief in him, not looking for things that don't have life in them, but standing firm. Standing firm, knowing, no, God, you've called me here. This is what you said. This is the life that you provided, and I'm going to eat off of this tree. I'm not going to try to take a little bit of what you give me and plant my own thing and see how it works. I'm not going to take a little bit of this person's idea and a little person's that idea and try to make my thing work. No, I want all of yours. I want what you have for me. That's the king that we live for. And he understood that more than what we could know. He goes on in verse, I finished 19. He goes on in verse 20. He says, when the disciples saw this, they were amazed. How did this fig tree wither so quickly? So remember, Matthew's doing it all in one shot. Mark, he goes into the temple, he throws over the tables, and then he comes back to the fig tree, and they see that the fig tree is withered. And they say to themselves, how did the fig tree wither so quickly? Yesterday it had green leaves on it. It was living, and now it's withered away. And Jesus replied, truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask in prayer. Sometimes I think we take that out of context and we try to make that a standalone idea or verse. And maybe we can. But I believe what he's saying here is, listen, this fig tree was not representing the faith that I have in it. This fig tree is not representing faith at all. This fig tree is representing something that looks like faith, but is not faith. And so Jesus says, listen, if you have faith, you can say to the fig tree in your own life, be withered. You can say to the mountains in your life, be cast into the sea. Why? Because those things, it's those mountains in our way of having faith. It's those false fig trees that are in our lives that are in the way of actually grabbing hold of the thing that Jesus grabbed hold of us for. Let's not get caught with the counterfeit. Let's find ourselves with the true authenticness of who Jesus is, the things that he's called us to, the places that he's established us to be. That's where we're going to find life. That's where we're going to find prosperity. That's where we're going to find comfort and relief. You see it all the time. People, I'm getting mad. I don't like the way that guy dresses. I don't like that pastor or the way he preaches. So I'm leaving and I'm going to another church. Somewhere that you plant yourself. That God didn't plant you. Acts 17 says God determines the places and times in which we should live. I would wrap that up in even the churches that we go to. He calls us to specific places for specific times with specific people. Forever, some of us, yeah. All of us, not maybe not. But if God calls us here, I'm not going to take a plant from another place and try to do something in here that God has not called me to do. I'm going to cultivate my tree. And I'm going to experience the prosperity. I'm going to experience the comfort. I'm going to experience the relief. Because I know out there, I can probably make it on my own. For a little bit. But I'll be confronted with the same issues that I was confronted with here that I wanted to leave. You see that in jobs all the time. My manager, my boss, so I'm out. And then you leave, you quit, you go find another job, and you have the same exact type of manager or boss. And you think, how did this guy follow me? And it's not him following you or her following you. It's your baggage, your luggage that you thought was yours. Really wasn't. It was someone else's that you're carrying around with you. God's saying, put that away. Trust in me. Plant the trees that I'm calling you to plant in this place. Cultivate those things so that you don't have to curse those things in your life that need to be cursed, so that you don't have to say to the mountains in your life, be removed and cast into the sea. Let's just have faith for what God has called us to here, right now. The places and the times and the spaces and the people that God has called you to be and be with. This is the journey. This is our road to the cross. This is how we get to this place of fully sacrificing everything that we are so that God could be everything that he wants to be in us. Amen.